Welcome, Jack. Oh, hey. We were just talking before we
Mhm,
started talking, and
mhm,
um, I think there's a few things. I think deep seek is interesting, but I do have a subtle, well, maybe not so subtle, um, puzzle, and you can talk me off the ledge because I don't know if you've noticed, but AI chatbots and such, they tend to be really encouraging.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
obviously they must be trained this way, but
Mhm.
they rarely tell me how dumb my ideas are. But maybe you can because I trust you more than I do it. Um, but you were saying how when it comes to how people behave, that's in my fascination. Being in design and psychology,
Mhm,
right? And I have this fascination with computers because.
mhm,
Um, but ever since ever since the massive multiplication thing
mhm,
became has all these emergent qualities, I keep tracking back to understanding Watson and Crick and DNA because for some reason I keep thinking this whole attention bit is
mhm,
so similar to the way DNA works, right? There's tons and tons of it. Most of it is ignored, right? Yet some of it is very operatively interesting and also mutations and so forth. So I keep thinking there's some analog to the way we're made.
mhm.
I don't know.
Well, yeah.
So like,
So ghost in the machine, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
what is the ghost, right? Is the ghost in the human brain? Is the ghost in some sort of maybe tricky interplay between DNA and clearly, there's memory in DNA, that can be passed through generations, and it's I mean, I have my wife and I, we sometimes look at birds that are kind of making nests, it's in the hedge, kind of close to our house,
Mhm.
and we always marvel, oh, how do they know how to make that nest? I mean, it's such a engine from the engineering point of view, such a sturdy piece of engineering, right? And it's just made by instinct, right? So what is the role of the brain in there? What is the role of basically genetic basically memory being passed,
Mhm.
from for generations? So this is, yeah, so now we have this deep seek kind of marvel, kind of being the subject of discussions, and obviously, I mean, people who are in the AI circles probably are not surprised at all, because the innovation is moving very rapidly, in the direction of basically, I mean, there's two kind of vectors, right? Like, one vector is AGI, right? Artificial
Mhm.
general intelligence, right? That's what everybody wants, right? So machines being able to teach other machines, and kind of this start this feedback loop that is going to be leading to singularity, right? That's the Ray Kurzweil thing.
Well,
And
hold on,
then
because now I'm getting some Ubermensch vibes, right? Like, hold on. I mean, there isn't there isn't any perfect model, right? And that's true of people too, right? There's no
Mhm,
we have maybe some of these hard-coded abilities, right? We might have some athletic abilities or whatever. These are maybe some advantages over time that evolution gives you, just like your birds that are able to make nests probably lived longer than the ones that couldn't. So you encode all that into this sort of meaningless stew, right? I guess meaningless until we learn to decode it, which is a whole
mhm,
nother fun story, right? That we are able to even understand these things,
mhm,
in terms of fairly recently. Let's put it that way, right? Like you say,
mhm,
oh, it is just a bunch of mathematical computation, like deep seek or whatever. And you might need to help me with this because I played
mhm,
with deep seek, and the only thing that I learned, which I did find interesting, is that it sits there and thinks about it. I think we had an episode on this, right? This idea of this
mhm,
like meta cognition a little bit being
mhm,
added as a more bird nest like making ability that, right? You don't just rush right into putting together your
Yeah.
survival
Yeah.
strategy. You think about it first. Okay. So and forgive me if I get this wrong, but the thing that I did was it will tell you its thought process. And it takes a
Yeah.
fair amount of time. I'm running it locally, but it'll
Mhm.
tell you like, well, what the hell did he mean by this? And then, it really is somewhat colloquial the way it is like, well, but that doesn't work because of this, or something. And then it comes up with the wrong answer. So, what's
Mhm.
interesting is more that show your work part, right? Like how
Mhm.
it kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
acts like maybe the part of the article that I haven't published is that we don't act like that. We are losing our critical ability to think because so
Mhm.
much is wrote or done for us. But as I said, I open up a whole big can of worms. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, I totally agree with you. I mean, but there's so but there is this other vector, right? So I
Hmm.
mentioned one vector of kind of the AI improving, right, and finally reaching the AGI. The maybe not right away godlike capabilities, but really kind of like clearly exceeding humans, in a lot, right? So that's one vector. The other vector is making the models smaller and faster and more efficient, right? So
Okay.
kind of accomplish a lot, but maybe with a smaller model that can run on the phone or kind of be trained by with a lot less computational expense, right? So that's the other vector of innovation,
Oh,
right? And
and energy is
yeah,
not trivial, right? This is the same
yeah,
with
yeah, exactly,
Bitcoin.
yeah,
Like these,
yeah,
I have friends who will refuse to use this because of the energy signature, which may not be wrong, like in terms of taking a
exactly,
stance,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 3, 4 years ago, because before LLMs, everybody was talking about how expensive computationally blockchain and how many, nuclear power plants we will have to, build just to kind of keep up with this blockchain ledger, and maintenance of it, right? Which is computationally very expensive, right?
Hmm.
Now we have LLMs and all that is kind of like quadrupling all those discussions, right? So yeah, this is not a trivial thing. But so what the Chinese came up with is maybe some sort of a shortcut. Maybe they multiplied them matrices. I mean, we know that they multiplied them those matrices in a different way, achieving
Hmm.
some efficiencies. But yeah, I think it's a small step towards because if you make a more efficient car, right, you're not going to drive it less because you want to kind of realize those savings, right? You're going to drive it more. So obviously we're going to throw more AI with at problems with those algorithms because we will say, oh, they are saving us 10%, or maybe tenfold. I think it's a tenfold saving. So which in the AI world is nothing huge. I mean, tenfold saving is kind of okay. All right, okay. So we are running the multiplication better. So now we're going to look for another tenfold saving. So yeah, so this is kind of getting interesting, but the end result is going to be okay. So we can now do more with this AI. So we're going to try a lot more AI. More cascading, more conversations, more internal kind of thinking, like you are describing. So at the end of the day, yeah, I don't think we're gonna lose. We're gonna lose any kind of CO2 emissions. We're gonna increase those, I think.
Hmm. Well, and perhaps that's something that at least for me, the introduction of this tool, right, was never paywalled. If you were to, I'll go back to my favorite company of all, Microsoft, right? Like
Mm,
anything you want to do with Microsoft is going to cost you, and it's going to cost you pretty much dearly, right? Like you're in for a pound. And even
mm,
my other favorite company, Adobe, is like this, right? If you want to edit your 4K video, you need to pony up a serious amount of cash for the tools to be able to do that. And
yeah.
fine, that's how you make money, I guess, and good for
Mm,
them, right? But
yeah.
you and I, or maybe just me, I always got by pirating it, right? So pirating Photoshop for 20 odd years was just something you did because you couldn't, you didn't use it enough, to your
Mm,
point, to want to lay out the money, but you wanted the skills to be able to use the program because it was so ubiquitous, right? So that when you got into a position, hey, do you know how to use Microsoft Word? I think is still a part of many skill sets, or at least job descriptions, which means what exactly? Nothing, I guess, right? Do you know how to type and make a file? I guess is what it really says. Sorry, people, but you know what I mean. Do you know how to use Excel? Probably also meaningless, right? Because these are just tools for a very narrow use case, right? And they're great at that narrow use case, but they're not good at. I don't think that Microsoft Word, for example, makes you at all good at writing. I never use it for that purpose, right? I don't use it at all. Somehow people use it to send a piece of text to somebody else. So I used to just bitch, like, that it's already, an email is already a word processor. So you don't have to say, here's my notes and send a document. Like, you could just send me the notes. Is this still relevant? I mean, it seems like that still happens, right? The mental model problem that we talked about a couple of weeks back. Like, what are these things for? Anyway, I'm trying to get to Gen AI sort of came out of the gate is like, here you go. It's all free. Enjoy. And I talk. And, I'll analyze your tax statements for you or whatever, right? I mean, it's all been free based on big bucks of tech companies or what? In your experience, is that very different or?
Well, yeah. So again, I mean, you are kind of talking about many aspects. Yeah. So I think as tools, right? There's I think I've read one of the things that those latest models that like DeepSeek can do, right? And they can manage your Windows environment for you, so you can. So yeah, ultimate discussion point, right? I don't want to click anymore. I'm going to tell the AI to click and open a window for me or close it for me, right? Or I don't want to write anything, so I'm just going to I'm not even going to dictate. I'm gonna say 2 words, and I expect the novel to show up, next day, or within 5 minutes, right? So yeah, I think that I mean those tools will probably are on the endangered species list, because if you have language models that can do drawings for you, right, and they can probably do it within Photoshop, right? Or certainly you can have assistants that will be your co-pilot, not for programming, but also for the writing process. So you don't have to touch Microsoft Word. It will format for you. It will write for you. It will edit for you. Then this is kind of really profound, all right? And what would be the jump from today, let's say, where you can do things really well, to the AGI or super intelligence to singularity. This is kind of a little bit of a, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to better use Microsoft Word, right? What would be the improvement that the AI can give me to kind of like, I don't know, make three-dimensional documents now, or but there is areas where there's still deficiencies, right? Like, for example, in programming, I do a lot of development where I try to build I try to offload my cognitive difficulties in writing complex pieces of software. So
Sure.
so I'm trying to figure out how to best structure those pieces, because I know that the AI will break down if it works on a big chunk of software. So therefore, I have to be a pretty good software engineer to be able to kind of chunk the problem in my head and just tell the AI, hey, you are working on that chunk right now, and it's a small chunk. Once you are finished, we're going to move to another chunk, right? And this is something that I have to do. But maybe the next generation of AI will be able to do this for me, right? And that would be very significant.
Well, you bring up my other favorite topic, I guess, because I teach it, is architectures,
Mm,
right? So
mm,
architecture to me is I just think of it as foundational stuff, right? Like you can hang anything you want on the wall, but the actual walls need to stand. And the
mm,
architectures of, we go back to DNA, right? Is this self-replicating part, right? It's a pretty
mm,
accurate way to replicate a really long and complex piece of code, but it's still
mm,
errors are introduced. And then
mm,
those pieces of code are actually grouped into these things like chromosomes and functions and stuff like that. So don't get me
mm,
started on cellular automata because ChatGPT and I talked about that way too long. But
mm,
it's still an architectural issue that when you say, like, how do we accomplish this goal? Well, it might take lots and lots of different people with different skill sets, but you have to communicate to them all differently. And I think that's why I like it, because I know how to communicate through interaction design or through design of some sort, right? People can
mm,
maybe understand if I do a good enough job, but I get to do it once. I can't personalize it for every person. Just like, unlike teaching, where I try to individualize it for each person, I still have to have a general
mm,
idea of what's going on. So I like it as a crutch, it can help me
mm.
communicate differently to different people, which is another positive of getting more people to engage.
Yeah.
But again, that's a tool that I don't know that AGI is going to have any effect upon it, right? Because it's going to do what I ask it to do anyway, I guess. These are just these weird, willing servants that we can bark orders at right now, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not so sure because this AGI, if we are trying to define AGI as just an extrapolation of what we are looking at right now, right,
Mm,
where you kind of type something and you press enter, then I would say that that press enter thing is also on the endangered species list.
mm,
Um, there's already the concept of, I don't know if you have the latest iPhone, but the latest iPhone will have dedicated circuitry for AI that is going to be running 24/7, and maybe it was just trying to observe you, spy on you, or however you want to call it, but it's going to be a continuous process, right? Um, so the AGI mode of operation might be that, okay, it's going to be running, it's going to be kind of trying to do something like solve a problem, and your interaction with it, it's just going to be an interruption for the
mm,
AI. Hey, maybe you are kind of swaying me in a certain way, but I'm still doing whatever I'm doing,
mm,
and you just kind of, hey, here's your simple problem, right? Here's your here's your differential equation solution. Okay, I did it in millisecond, but I'm thinking about something else, right? And that's I think that's what people are trying to accomplish with those better and better models. The AGI is not just kind of like left click kind of a model. I think it's a much deeper kind of proposition.
Well, so in your estimation, did DeepSeek, and as I said, I'm only aware of slight, I don't have perfect understanding of these models, right? I know they have names and such, but to test their capabilities, it's a little bit like playing a record on your stereo and saying, like, well, should sound good. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like, here's some baseline. It used to be whenever they came out with a new computer, they're like, wow, it just crushes the Geekbench
mm.
score. You see what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
after 20 years of that, you're like, well, I've never really needed to have my computer do this. It seems more maybe marketing oriented, but as you said, no, these models actually do burn fuel.
Mm,
They are I guess is the term massively inefficient. You know what I mean? Or is the
mm.
whole point
Yeah.
that the efficiencies are baked into the training, and this is what I maybe don't
Mm,
understand about models, is that you have to expend a lot to train them, and then they become more like little creatures that run out there and do things. You see
Yeah,
what I
little
mean? Like,
widgets. Yeah. Yeah.
oh, okay. So is that, I mean, I'm talking architecture. Is that how they're architected?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're making great point, right? I mean, there could be, we are looking at systems that probably, used, gigawatts of power, emitted millions of tons of CO2, that at the end of the day can be used to answer a question, hey, what's the day today? And they will get that question wrong.
Probably, most likely, right?
Yeah. So there is massive
Hey, can you
inefficiencies in
Google
that.
it for me is actually what people will ask. But
Exactly. Yeah,
well, and,
yeah.
and I mean, not to talk about monetization, but when things cost a lot of money, but they're given away for free, it's always a little puzzling, and I guess our ability to compartmentalize advertising is famous as Americans. I keep telling people as I go abroad, and if I go to Portugal and such, is there's no like advertising. It's very rare. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it certainly isn't pervasive as the thing that you would see most of the time, right? Like you would only see things that have a monetary effect, even though they're fairly inefficient, right? There's no reason that this particular advertisement's not personalized to you. It just so happens to come on and tell you about baby cream just because that's the model of how they give you this stuff for free, right? And so, the people charging for AI, like you just said, is to help offset the cost of all this training. I still wonder, once a model is made, is it kind of like, here you go, anyone can use this, I can run them, you know what I mean? If you have a phone, I think you can run many models, right? Pretty capable models.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, yeah. I mean, it's the cost of building the model is greater than running it, right? But
Okay.
still you have to have enough horsepower to basically manage that memory, right? Because a large language model is just basically something like a piece of software that has very large memory requirement, right? So the GPUs that you have to use have to be really have to have extensive memory capabilities, right? So that means that you have to have a lot of power to run them, and obviously, so the fact that they are charging for it, it's not surprising at all. They are overcharging probably quite a bit, but
Okay.
um,
Okay.
but it's but then if DeepSeek shows up and it's, let's say, 10 times less, uses 10 times less energy, right? I mean, so what's going to happen next time? They're just going to multiply DeepSeek by 10, and it's still going to be a beast. It's just going to have more capabilities, right? Uh, but I think that there's going to be a number of paradigm shifts, right? Like maybe something that is not going to be very proud of, like military applications, right? Like the drone warfare, for
Oh,
example, that
yeah. The U.S.
unfortunately is,
intelligence service
yeah,
alone, I can't
yeah,
imagine that this isn't a huge to monitor
yeah,
all foreign conversations. I mean, that's gotta be
exactly, yeah.
hard.
Yeah, exactly. And then there is satellite data. And I know for a fact that even if several years ago, there was like petabytes of satellite data that is not being analyzed. It's just sitting
Oh,
somewhere,
it can't be.
right?
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
not enough people, and the skill needed must be,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
so there are grand challenges, right? Like autonomy, right, for military applications or for other applications as well, right? And then the massive data analytics. So that means that we will have to have systems that can write code, highly efficient code that can sift through all of this, right?
Hmm.
And that is something that I would say I would welcome, right? Because it's a very difficult problem to solve. Let's say for a human being, for a programmer, right? Like how do I deal with all the data formats and all the problems and all the ETL, ELTs, and aggregations. So yeah, so AGI in programming would be a game changer, and probably far beyond robotics and far beyond just software engineering, right? So yeah, I think that yeah, and DeepSeek is just a step, right? Like it was a great step, but already we know that there is other models being trained as we speak that will be better than DeepSeek, maybe more expensive, right? Who knows? But certainly there will be better. So yeah, I mean the next year if we talk about large language models, we will probably have a different experiences and different views, right? Than we have,
Hmm.
let's say, at the beginning of 2025.
Well, that increased expectation, I think, is interesting just as a tool, but I think what you're saying is that you're kind of seeing this, it's going to evolve beyond a tool, right? It's going to
Yeah.
actually be more integral to some kind of transaction or some kind of decision. I don't know. That's where I think we talked about it last week, right? Which is what is going to be our role, if not just to be blamed for when things go wrong, which is the
Mhm.
humorous human thing that we like to do, right? Like we don't like to blame technology. I guess my curiosity, just help me understand a little bit. So the computing in itself, I always mention it gets twice as good and twice as cheap, right? Like
Mhm.
that's been its curve
Mhm.
because of, I don't
Mhm.
know, it just seems to go that way now. So that AIs were, when you're heading toward this Uber AI or whatever it's called, was it
Mhm.
supposed to be 10 times as expensive and 10 times better, which would go against the curve, right? Is that
Mhm.
is that how it was architected? That we need a billion suns blasting into some massive I mean, this sounds like more dork dreams, which isn't, if you look at the Nvidia guy and Mark Zuckerberg, I'm sure they're just
Mhm.
dorkier than hell, right? Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I mean, having a
yeah,
lot of
that.
shiny things with, lights flashing on it seems like,
Mm,
that's the solution to most problems rather than
mm.
Wall-E or something, you know.
Yeah, and maybe NVIDIA I mean, if you go to NVIDIA website and see what they are trying to offer, right? So
Hmm.
they are trying to offer autonomous systems, right? They are trying to offer synthetic characters, right? Avatars that kind of replace people, from screens, right? They are trying to offer obviously natural language processing and all that stuff. So if in robotics and
Hmm.
metaverse still kind of like lurking somewhere over there,
Sure.
so yeah, so then there is more and more again, I'm kind of seeing VR, virtual reality, and augmented virtual reality kind of also showing up quite a bit, right? So all that stuff, right, is kind of there, right? And maybe the grant application will be in biological science, right? Where, really, the Darwinian, models, right? Mathematicians don't like them, right? Because the Darwinian model was
Hmm.
created at the time when they had no idea, right? That there is like cellular level programming, for example. If they did, they probably would come up with something else. So mathematicians don't think that the Darwinian model is accurate because there was not enough time to do all that stuff, in kind of genetically driven processes, over eons, right? So billions years was not enough for them, according to the mathematicians, right? Then
Okay.
then there is this programming, there's level programming, so there is a shadow of a programmer looming somewhere because it's very difficult to write that kind of a program even through genetic algorithms, right? So maybe there's going to be AI that's going to kind of make sense out of this, and maybe will create therapies and stuff like that uh, that will revolutionize our understanding of biological processes, right? And I'm not saying that has to be like a intelligent design kind of like a conclusion that they will come up with, but what I'm trying to say is that maybe there is going to be something that is going to help us with the common problems that we have, with
No,
our
no,
health.
I'm with you on this black swan thing, by the way. It's
Mm,
really more of a I'm reading a little bit about just how hierarchical our way of understanding is, which probably does not represent the actual world we live in, but it's just a
Mm,
useful way
mm,
of tackling problems, right? And our language is hierarchical, right? So that's why, there is no particular reason that we have to use these things, but we use it to understand other things. So, for example, when you talk about, evolution or something like that, serendipity, right? Black swans, just maybe
mm,
just luck, right? It just so
mm,
happened that luck happens, and therefore luck produced these outrageously advantageous situations. You see, like, and that speeds up the timeline, right? I mean, and we're
mm,
seeing it probably right now with artificial intelligence in general, right? I mean, it's almost sheer luck that we
mm.
stumbled upon this thing. Sorry, I don't think that anyone really thought this would work.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people were hoping. I mean, I was hoping,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I when I was initially when I was a grad student and started writing artificial neural networks, they were kind of like human,
yeah.
kind of derived
They
ideas,
solved
right?
really
And
interesting problems. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
or they could model really interesting problems, right?
yeah,
So why
yeah,
not?
yeah, exactly, right. So why don't we just make them bigger and bigger, and maybe human level intelligence will emerge? And it did, right? It was a few tricks, in matrix multiplication and the access to hardware that can manage a lot of neurons, and then there you go. Well, we have something that finally can be called, you know, AI, right?
Well, but it came only after Wikipedia, after the entire universe decided to encode all of human ideas. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Mm,
like that
mm,
was a triumph, right? That this
mm,
dumb little wiki program can now contain the most authoritative and I guess most accurate representation of the universe, which used to be a couple
mm,
of guys did that. I mean, literally, I think one guy did the
mm,
Oxford
mm,
English Dictionary or something. If you look back, like these polymaths, like Newton, or
mm,
you didn't say Newton, you said Darwin, right? He kind of,
mm,
was one of these polymath types, just like Morse was an artist. He wasn't
mm,
into coding. He just
mm,
was solving a problem with what he knew how to do, which just so happened to be, really useful, right? When it came to anyway, so I guess if anything, I guess maybe we should understand the beauty of serendipity more, that just good things happen sometimes in when you least expect them.
Well, yeah, the problem with Black Swan is that, if
Hmm.
you look at the evolutionary processes, and again, I'm kind of trying to think about, evolutionary processes that create intelligence, right? And can we kind
Sure.
of maybe can we do this with our large language models? But if you look at evolution and the circumstances around it over billions of years, it's really kind of like a freakish black swan event. It was not just one; it was like a
Oh,
collection of many
totally. I
of
mean, isn't the
those.
whole universe some massive amount of luck that there's this
Yeah,
constant that keeps everything
yeah,
from just exploding, like crazy, and nobody could figure out why. And I don't know if they ever will, right? Because it's sort of like, hey, dude, you lucked out. Just call it a
yeah,
day.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, so it may well be right that by some sort of an accident, somebody will come up with this matrix multiplication procedure that is going to be kind of a black swan event, and we will kind of get maybe through some sort of a rapid jump in in a world where AGI actually exists, right? And it may happen,
Mhm.
let's say next Friday, right? Or next
Yeah,
year, right?
I
Something like
mean, I guess as long as it's not a February 29th or something really weird like that,
yeah,
like.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think it's good to guess talk about the utopic things. I tend to always seem to focus on preparation, right? I think preparations are only defense, you know, that you somehow are understanding it and you're prepared so that whatever might happen, you don't have enormous shifts. In working with computers, it always seemed to be as though, you know, that next big thing tended to not materialize, right? Like it always seemed to be evolutionary rather than the serendipitous thing until now, you know. And maybe this is just a perspective of like, we're not going to get better computers, you know, they're already too good. We're not going to live more fulfilling lives, which is probably where we should go next time, because, you know, how this benefits us is probably the biggest unknown right now. As we are calling this series Surviving AI, it's because the human part used to be to have, like yourself, incredible skills developed over a lifetime, right? And true passion and understanding for your topic, right? And with me, I just fuck around a lot. So therefore, you know, I have a lot of experiences to draw upon just through random sampling. How's that, right? And random sampling for me allows me to see something maybe in a different perspective, which might give me, you know, maybe an advantage, right? And I still think that that's both ways are under some kind of siege, you know, when it comes to our relationships, but that's why we talk, right? Because it's this kind of thing of like, hey, it would be nice if everything worked out well, but how do we prepare for or actually actively act toward our best interests as a community, as a group, as a country, maybe even as a world, right? Like how is that gonna truly change our outcomes?
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, maybe kind of a good approximation of a positive outcome would be that perhaps in a couple of months we will have the technology that will give us an additional participant in our conversations, right? And that would be an AI, maybe with a nice avatar, kind of like nodding, and trying to maybe offer a different perspective, right? And that would be great, right? But there is also maybe other ways, and I love to read AI. I mean, read sci-fi, about AI, and a lot of times there is like this dystopian scenarios where the AI is just going to be sitting there and it's going to be optimizing things, and maybe it will optimize the birth rates by just mixing some chemicals into our food or whatever, and it's kind of going to do things that would be absolutely totally unacceptable. But before it's going to be AGI and it's going to be so complex, and we will have very difficult insight into it, or maybe we don't even the cognitive overloading, maybe we wouldn't be even interested in kind of looking what the AI is doing. We're just going to be sitting there. That is also a very high possibility, right? I mean, if and it may just get started in pharmaceutical areas where kind of you're just gonna run the testing with the AI, right? And the log files, if they're gonna be 5 petabytes, nobody's gonna look at those, and maybe you will see those log files not really being so too promising. But hey, AI tested the new compound, and now we're gonna sell it because it's going to be giving us like less appetite for sweets, or kind of maybe more appetite for sweets, but we are not gonna get fat, that kind of thing.
I do. Yeah. I mean, the only thing you can do, which is, as you said, pretty interesting, is to look to sci-fi, right? Because the scenarios are what's interesting, not necessarily the methods. It's like what does that entail in terms of how we change our habits, or my big thing is trust, right? Who do you trust, or what do you trust when it comes to kind of making decisions about your life, right? So I did happily get some doctor results, and I went in to try to understand how much caffeine I should drink. And what was interesting to me was that through a little bit of dialogue, I could actually feed it my results, talk about the kind of coffees that I like, and have recommendations as to what thresholds would keep me a little healthier than others, right? So I guess I could have figured this out myself, but I thought the personalization is so interesting that we run off of generalizations most of the time, right? Like, hey, I think this seems like a good idea. It seems like a good idea to do this just through, the society. But that you could actually get something that was tailored toward you by a machine is again, it can be very effective when it comes to behavior modification. We both deal with this with our work
Yeah.
with AI psychology, right? Like having a machine to talk to is sometimes more convenient and more trustworthy than talking to a person, which is reasonable, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I mean,
and
that's another topic, but it's still, what do we use this stuff for, right? Like, is it to benefit us as individuals, as a group? Is it, you see what I mean? Like, it seems still more individual focused to me because some will be haves and have nots, as always with technology.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to have a HAL 9000, right, as their personal companion, right? And but then the personalization that you're talking about, right? Like, hey, the HAL 9000 in the movie was so trustworthy and so. I mean, it even though it was just kind of like a four small TV screens, but it had this language that they picked that actor with that accent and kind of it was just emitting trustworthiness and super intelligence, right? So who wouldn't want to have that kind of a co-pilot, maybe not all the time around you, but being available, right? Like, hey, if I run into a problem with my life, I will have some super intelligence that will kind of get me out of a bind, right? So and if that was personable, even better, right? And what I think about synthetic emotions that can be really very easily modeled. So perhaps this is kind of closer,
Yeah.
very closer than we think.
Always, well, as I guess we should wrap, as always, I think of you as having that in my life I trust you, right? Because I think your motivations are clear. I think we'll just have to continue the discussion next week, and I hope we then talk a little bit more about our role in or how this can change some of our habits, especially around work. I mean, that's kind of, we skirt around this a lot, but I think it's finally time to unpack that one. But as for this week, thank you, Jack.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.